Good morning, students. This is Sonu Sharma, and today I'll teach you the first chapter of your book in political science, power sharing. So, we all are familiar with the notion of political power. You see, anywhere in the world, you can see that there is a kind of conflict, and most of these conflicts, which leads to movements, which leads to demonstrations, and people coming out on the road, that just happens because of that happens just because of conflict, and these conflicts are political conflicts, and they are related to power sharing. For example, I hope you might be keeping your eyes on the current news or the current affairs. So, just a few months ago, you might have heard about the protest in Hong Kong. So, what was all that protest about? All that protest about was that the Hong Kong government, they wanted to impose their exorbitant powers on the Hong Kong people. But the Hong Kong people, they wanted that power should remain in their hands. Power should not, severe restrictions should not be imposed on their freedom of speech and expression. So, freedom of speech and expression. So, where we will talk about power sharing in the general sense. Regarding power sharing, I am reminded of a statement by Lord Acton. Very few people know about Lord Acton, but actually his saying regarding power sharing is famous all over the world. He was a British historian, and he said that power tends to corrupt and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. I repeat it, power tends to corrupt and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. It means the larger the person has a power, he or she is more likely to be corrupt. So, in modern democracy, power sharing is a key concept. Uh, that is why we choose our representatives for a fixed period of time, and we see their performance. If we are not satisfied with their performance in their tenure, then we remove them in the next elections. So let us start the chapter, and the chapter, as I have told you, that the approach of NCRT is to at first give example and then go on build a definition gradually. So in your book, as I have already provided you with the PDF copies of the chapter which I am teaching, because I know that it might be inconvenient for you because of the lockdown due to coronavirus. The stationery shops are closed, the bookshops are closed. You can prepare notes also whenever or wherever you think that it's necessary to pen down some important points. So let us start the first topic of this chapter. So the first topic of this chapter is there is a description of Belgium. So what is the geographical description of Belgium? Belgium is a small country in Europe. It is surrounded by Netherlands, Germany, and Luxembourg. The population of Netherlands is very low, if we compare it. For example, it is around 1 crore, So 1 crore, that is roughly equal to the population of Haryana. I would like to just say that, look, most of the European countries, they are tiny in area also. At the same time, they have a low population. Unlike our country, where we have got even less than 4% of the world's area, but regarding population, we are something like 17.4 or 5% of the total population. So, and you see that Indian states, they are something like they are a country in itself. For example, Uttar Pradesh, if we take it as a separate entity, it will be the fifth largest country in the world in terms of population. So now we'll have to read about the ethnic composition. So look, this ethnic composition, the term ethnic composition is going to be very important in this chapter. Now we know composition. Composition means what a thing is made up of. So when we are talking about ethnic, and then we have to understand this term called ethnic. So actually ethnic is made from the word ethnicity, and ethnicity denotes race. It can also denote caste. It can also denote people with different food habits, people with different culture, people with different religion. So ethnicity, you will not find that equivalent of ethnicity in Hindi. There is no word which completely satisfies the meaning of ethnicity in Hindi. They are nearly equivalent, but they are not. So now talking about Belgium. In Belgium there are two regions. The one is the Flemish region, and the other is the Wallonia region. So in Belgium there are two communities, the Dutch and the Dutch they live in the Flemish region, and the French they live in the Wallonia region. So actually the population of the Dutch is 59%, and the population of the French is something like 41%. So you see, and we have also got Germans, that is 1%. So you look that these the Dutch they are in majority, the French they are in minority, and the most we can say the tiniest minority is the German, who share just 1%. And the condition in Belgium is because of their neighboring countries. We know that if on neighboring countries affect each other in terms of language, in terms of population also. For example, you see that India and Nepal, they are neighboring countries. So what do we find? That there are some Indians, they live in Nepal, they are called Madhesis. In the same way, you find that the Nepalese have also affected the Indian culture also. For example, you see that in Darjeeling or in Sikkim or in Uttarakhand, there is a large group of population which speaks Nepalese. I just mean to say that neighboring countries affect each other's identity, they complement each other's identity. So the same is the case with Belgium. Belgium has the population of the Dutch, which is 59%, because Belgium is surrounded by Netherlands, and we know that the Dutch are the people of the Netherlands. In other words, the Dutch are the inhabitants of Netherlands. At the same time, you look the French. It is also surrounded by the French. They are the most. The French. They are the most powerful people. They had been historically the most powerful people in Europe. For example, you will be surprised to know that English, although today we consider it as a global language, but there was a time when English was considered to be an inferior language. Even the royal court in England, they used to speak French. So French has always been considered the language of the higher class all over Europe, isn't it? At the same time, Netherlands also, Germany, we see that there is a little effect of Germany, that is why they have got 1% population. Luxembourg, many of you are not familiar with the names of countries in this world. It might sound very strange to you, but Luxembourg, is a very, it's an expensive country also. It is one of the country with the highest GDPs. It is one of the country with the highest per capita income. And you will be surprised to know that in Luxembourg, for every average person there are 5 cars. Now you can imagine the kind of prosperous life they are living, the kind of prosperity that is present there. In terms of wealth, Luxembourg is, more wealthier than Switzerland. So, and it is called a tax haven. You should know that about what about tax havens. People go there, they live there, they just get the citizenship just by providing with some money. But Luxembourg is very famous, and it's one of the most expensive countries, one of the richest countries. So coming to the point is that we have now understood about the ethnic composition of Belgium. Now Brussels, or Brussels you might call it, it is the capital of Belgium, and in Brussels the situation is quite the opposite. Why opposite? Because you see that in Belgium, if we talk about the country as a whole, the Dutch are in majority, the French are in minority, but the situation gets reversed in Brussels. In Brussels, 80% of the people are French and 20% of the people are Dutch. So now why this opposite situation? Is it a contradictory form? No, it's not contradictory. Just focus on the second line. The second line says that the minority French speaking community was relatively rich and powerful. Now this very well explains the previous line. Why this very well explained? We all know that in any capital city of any world, you see that most of the people who are the inhabitants of the capital city, they belong to the dominant community. They belong to the community which are relatively financially well off than the others, who are more resourceful and who are more powerful. So now let us focus to the another line. So this was resented by the Dutch speaking community. Now you look, resent, resent is when used in a verb, or even as a noun, it is something like you don't like a situation, you don't like a situation, at the same time you feel helpless, you cannot do anything to remove it. In Belgium, the French, they got the benefits of education much earlier than the Dutch, and as a result they got very much powerful, resourceful, wealthy, educated. The Dutch, they too wanted to be educated, they too wanted to be they too wanted to be resourceful, but there was no way they could do these things. So there were tensions in the decades of the 1950s and the 1960s, and that tension was more visible, it was more problematic in Brussels, because Brussels itself was it was a very different, or we can say it was a queer kind of problem, peculiar kind of problem. So this is the description of Belgium that has been given in your book, that has been explained by me. Now let us focus on another point, that is Sri Lanka. So you might be seeing Ramayana nowadays. It's very popular. People are stuck to the TV seeing it. So you must have heard about, about Ravan. Ravan was the king of Lanka, and that Lanka is now known as Sri Lanka. It's a neighboring country of India. It's our neighbor in the Indian Ocean. And Sri Lanka is separated from India. You might have studied about in class 9 geography book, by Pak Strait and Gulf of Mannar. The Ram Setu bridge runs from Tamil Nadu to Sri Lanka. So the population of Sri Lanka is about the same as Haryana, and Sri Lanka has also got a diverse population. Now look, we are living in an age of globalization, and in globalization people move from one country to another in terms of in search of money, in search of better life, in search of better future, career, and studies also. So the pace has increased, but earlier also the same pace was present. Most of the countries in Asia, they are very diverse. For example, India is the most diverse country in the world. After India, you will find Indonesia is also diverse. Diversity means you will find people of different religions, different castes, different people of different food habits, people wearing different kind of dresses. They live in a country, in a single country, So the Sinhala people, or the Sihla, or the Sinhala is the correct pronunciation, and they are the majority community in Sri Lanka. Their share of population is 74%, and the Tamil speakers, they are just 18%, and there is further diversity within the Tamil speakers. In the Tamil population, that is 18%, there are native Tamils, and there are Tamils who migrated from India. You might be surprised to know that India and Sri Lanka were both ruled by the British. India got independent in 1947, and Sri Lanka got independent in 1948. In 1815, now look, this was the first year in 1815 when the British started taking laborers from Tamil Nadu and placing them in Sri Lanka for plantation, for plantation. And these laborers, they lived there, their progeny, their posterity, their children now live there. But the problem arose when the Sri Lankan government, it decided that it will not regard the Tamils who went from India during the colonial time, during the rule of the British to Sri Lanka as their own citizens. They denied their citizenship. So there the problem arose, and so we see that the Tamil community in Sri Lanka, it is further divided into two groups, the Indian Tamils and the Sri Lankan Tamils. So most of these the Tamils, they are located in the north and the eastern part of Sri Lanka. Now the problem in Belgium was just about language and culture, but the problem in Sri Lanka, we can't say it as a problem. Look, diversity, it depends upon the government whether you realize your diversity. Diversity is a truth. Every government must accept it. You cannot do away with diversity. No country can live without diversity. It's practically impractical. For example, you see in the current world, we cannot, no country can do without other. So that's not practical. Now let's come that the problem in Sri Lanka was threefold. Why I say threefold? The problem was of language also, and the problem was of religion also. The Sinhala speakers, they were Buddhist. They were majoritarian Buddhist. Only some of them were, Christians. Most of the Tamils were either Hindus and Muslims. So the problem, we can say, was more acute in Sri Lanka. I have been saying that problem of presence of different communities, but students, I would like to remind here that the presence of different communities in a country can never be a problem. Democracy means you accommodate every kind of diversity, regional diversity, linguistic diversity, religious diversity. A true democracy shall and will and can always take every section of the population along each other on the path of development. Now let us just compare these two countries. What could happen in these in these two countries? We see that in Belgium, the situation was more acute in the capital Brussels. At the same time, we see that in Belgium, the difference between the majority and the minority community was not very high. It was just 59% Dutch versus 41% French. But if you compare, the situation in Sri Lanka, it is nowhere the Tamil stands in terms of population. The Tamil, they are 18%, the Sinhala, they are 74%. They are more than, it's like more than 4 times they are. So the Sri Lankans could easily, they could say that, look, we are more in numbers. As a result, we will impose our will upon you whether you like it or not. So this kind of situation is not good for any country, not only for democracy, it is not good for any country where the majority community, they think that just by the virtue of their larger numbers, they can impose their will on the minority community. This will lead to conflict, and we all know that conflict is not good for any country. You see, in Sri Lanka, because of this language conflict, a war started in the 1980s and that 1970s, and that war continued till 2009 until and unless, the person who was fighting on the side of Tamils, the Liberation Tiger and Tamil Ilams, his name was Vellu Pillai Prabhakaran, until he was killed in 2009, if I correctly remember the year, or in 2004. So, conflict is not good. Any government should try to avoid conflicts in the best possible manner. This is not good for democracy. And if the government comes, if the government supports any kind of conflict, that could lead to a very messy partition. It could happen in, for example, Sri Lanka could also get a messy partition. In Brussels also this could happen, isn't it? So in Sri Lanka, the Sinhala community enjoyed an even bigger majority and could impose its will on the entire country. So now let us look at what happened in both the countries. So we will, in the next class, we will read about the majoritarian in Sri Lanka, how that happened. And here I will just like to provide the overview of the whole chapter, what we are going to read. And I expect you that you read ahead so that it might be easier for you to understand. Look, up till class 9, you just have learned about two forms of power sharing, that is horizontal and vertical. We know horizontal. Why it's horizontal? They are placed in the same plane. You might be familiar with the word plane in mathematics. We place them in the same plane. It means these three components, they have got the same levels of power. That is why we call them a horizontal division of power. Executive, legislature and judiciary, this is like a check and balance system where one component of the government puts checks and balances on the others so that no one gets unlimited power. As I have already told you that the whole idea of power sharing is based on the idea that if power gets accumulated in single hand, that will lead to the destruction of the country. No entity in any country, and no entity, particularly when we are talking about democracy, we must be careful that power should not get accumulated in a single hand. At the same time, you might have learned about vertical division of power. Now, why do we say it vertical? Actually, if you see at the figure, it is something like a trickle down flow. The central government has got most of the powers, and the powers remaining apart from the central government, those powers are with the regional government. Now look, regional government are known by different names in different countries. For example, in our country, regions, they have been called states. If you look at some other countries, there are no states. There are provinces and there are provincial levels of government. So they have got, this is just the case of having some another name. Local government, we all know we have got a Nagarpalika in Luxembourg. For urban areas, we have got the municipal system. There are Nagar Panchayat, Nagar Parishad, or municipal corporations for big cities like Patna and Hajipur and Gaya. At the same time, we have got a 3-layer panchayat system, the local government system in the rural areas, which was recommended by the Balwant Mehta committee. And it was given a constitutional status in the year 1993. We'll read about that chapter we'll read about this topic in federalism, that is chapter number 2 in the next chapter. But look, in this whole chapter, we are, apart from horizontal division of power and vertical division of power, we are going to read about how power is shared among different social groups. Now, this is a very new concept which you are going to read in this class, and we will also come to know about how, apart from the political party which is in power, we are going to read about the different political groups. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if it is fast, if it is getting fast or if it is getting over your head, you can reply back. I would like to slow my speed. At the same time, if you have got any kind of problem, without any hesitation, you can ask, you can reply back, you can comment, and I'll be very glad to solve all your doubts. So that's all for today. Thank you.